sometimes in the spiritual path, you will feel like shit, right? So I guess we all have a tendency to remove pain, to get rid of pain, to desire to remove our suffering whenever we wish to remove it, right? And I think it's especially apparent in the in those who follow the spiritual path. And the reason that is because, we are always conditioned, we are always told to get rid of our suffering, or to get rid of our ego, to get rid of, our identity, to get rid of all of those things, right? And that is true. Those things do help us to become more successful in the spiritual path. However, what tends to happen is that desire to remove suffering becomes, in a sense, a habituation, a habit. So then it no longer, it basically becomes a part of the ego. It becomes a part of our own identity. And then that becomes the part that we have to get rid of. But then you might be thinking, okay, if that becomes, a part of our identity, that becomes part of our ego, then how do we get rid of that? It's already a part of our identity by then, right? It's like, if the ego is to remove our suffering, if the identity is to remove our suffering, then we can't really beat it by trying to remove it. We are basically falling into its own hands. Like we're just dancing around in a circle. And that's a thing that I contemplated about for a very long time. That's a thing that I personally struggled with for a very, very long time. And what I realized was that the solution to that lied, right, in the very thing that I did not want to do. And that was, guess what? To suffer. Yeah, suffering is good. Who knew? Apparently, suffering is a part of being a human. Who knew? Who knew? Like we were all in the spiritual path because we wanted to not suffer. We wanted to find a way out of suffering. And, we heard of all of these wonderful things about, getting rid of the ego, getting rid of our identity, becoming enlightened. That's how we learn to not suffer. And you're right, that is how we, learn to not suffer, you know. However, what most people don't realize is that it's not like, boom, it doesn't happen like that. It's a very, very gradual process. It's a very, very gradual process, right? It doesn't happen overnight. So what we need to learn is that we need to learn that it's okay to suffer and not to beat ourselves like over it, right? It's completely natural to suffer. Like, we are human beings. We feel pain, hence we suffer. That's it. We have all of these mental schematics that cause suffering, right? It's not like we are weird for suffering. Like, it's not like we're doing anything wrong, right? Just because we meditate, it doesn't mean that we are God, right? Stop trying to think that we are God. I know, like, a lot of people in this community think that, they are part of God, that we are God. And in like, I agree with what they mean, right? I agree, I understand them, I agree with what they mean. But the thing is, you still shit. You still burp, you still fart, you still eat. You're still a human, right? Like, on a relative level, you're still a human. Like, maybe in this metaphorical, transcendal, like, very high up spiritual level, you are a god. I agree with that to a certain extent, right? However, we need to understand it's okay to suffer, because what, like, what, because, like, what do you think would make you more happier, right? Learning to be happy while you're still suffering, or trying to get out of the cycle of suffering. Like, imagine if you still feel pain, if you still suffer, but deep inside you feel an inner sense of peace. So in a sense, you are not really suffering, you are still really happy, even though you are suffering. And that's a paradox, right? That's a very much a paradox, right? However, that's the first option. The second option, the latter, is, imagine this, right? You suffer and you don't feel happiness. You don't feel an inner sense of contentment. You don't feel an inner sense of peace. That sucks. That fucking sucks ass, balls. That's not good. Not good at all, right? For me personally, I prefer the former, of finding inner peace even while still suffering, because what that means is that you're capable of basically being a person who can become enlightened, in a sense, right? Because like most people get enlightenment wrong. They think that enlightenment is like never suffering again, and to a certain extent, they're right. However, the thing is, enlightenment simply means, if you study all of these old traditions, all of these Hindu traditions, if you go back to the source, to where it originated from, enlightenment simply meant the act of finally realizing one's true nature. That's it. And fully integrating that into your day-to-day life. That's it. So like if you have been in the spiritual path for a very long time, chances are you have had like, a awakening moment. You have seen the true nature of reality. You have had, like one of those big moments, you might call it by different things, but you probably have had it. And if you have not, you probably will in the near future, right? That's what they call the awakening moment, or what I like to call the awakening moment. And enlightenment is simply just the way I say it, right? It's just understanding that, and understanding that that's all there is. There's nothing else to life. What you saw was reality, and everything else is, in a sense, a byproduct of reality. And it's just you understanding it's okay. Everything's gonna be okay, and it's gonna be all right. Even if you suffer, even if you get mad, even if you cry, even if you shit, even if you feel as if you have all of these problems, you have these addictions, you have these mental habituations, you have all of these things, you still feel an inner sense of peace, right? In my experience, I feel this inner sense of peace. However, sometimes I also feel a lot of doubt, a lot of regret, a lot of, uh, I don't feel harmonious most of the time, but I still understand, you know, what reality is. And once I understood that that is how I should conduct my life, it's like all of my problems started to gradually fade away. I was like in this stage, what a lot of people call this the boring night of the soul, or like the dark night of the soul, whatever it may be. I was in that stage for a very long time, 2+ years. However, I got rid of it by, in a sense, simply understanding that trying to remove my own suffering is simply not the way, right? Like, it's okay to remove my suffering, but removing my suffering won't get me towards enlightenment, or, a stage of a stage where I'm not no longer going to suffer, because suffering is going to exist, right, man? It's just going to, like, life sucks sometimes, it fucking sucks ass. However, you can still be at peace while you suck ass. That's, well, that was not a good analogy, but some people, while they're sucking ass, they are probably at peace. They probably enjoy it. So, sometimes in life, you might be forced to suck ass. So, you know, would you rather hate that, or would you rather be at peace with that? You know, be at peace with the fact that you hate sucking ass, and then continue to suck ass. That's a. I'm sorry about the analogy, but that's. So yeah, uh, that's pretty much all I want to talk about. So like, if you are out there suffering, or like beating yourself up about not being at peace, not being enlightened yet, not being up there, not being a woo, whatever, bro, it's just like, it's okay, right? Like, there's like 8 billion people, we all die, it's not gonna matter that much, right? Like, yes, I understand, like, there's a lot of things that feel real, that feel wonderful, that feel amazing about life, right? And there's going to be a lot of things that feel the opposite. However, it's going to be all right, right? It's going to be all right. And that's just called trust. As long as you have that trust, you will be fine, you know? So, yeah, I don't know why I want to make this video, but yeah, peace.